And just confirm that you're able to see my, cool. All right, I've lost my mouse, so give me 1 second. Where'd you go? Don't know where that is. Okay, good. Just use my arrow keys. Okay, cool. Well, let's get started. I'm Christine Fajardo. I'm a member of the board for UXPA, and I'm going to be taking us through the intro. So we have, as we always do with every meeting, kind of some housekeeping that we like to run through. So we'll start with that. Then we'll introduce our speakers, and they will give their lovely presentation, which I'm excited about. And the way that we've been kind of doing this with the virtual meetings is to enter questions into the chat, and then we usually will go back to the questions at the end so that the speakers are able to kind of get through their presentation in that screen share mode and not have to worry about keeping an eye on that chat for questions. So we'll do that at the end. Let's see. Yeah, so a little bit about UXPA for anyone who's joining us for the first time. Welcome if you are. We're excited that you're here. And we're the User Experience Professional Association, New Hampshire chapter. And you don't have to be a member to join our meetings or hopefully other in-person events that we'll have someday in the future. But you'll see at the bottom of this slide, there's a handful of ways that you can stay in contact with us. Our website, nhuxpa.org, that's where you'll see events. We also cross-share them into our Facebook page, on Twitter. You'll also see them on LinkedIn as well. We have a listserv, so definitely look to sign up for that. And most recently, as we've been in quarantine mode, we have started a Slack workspace, and there's nice, interaction between different people in the group. We have a jobs channel, we have a UX writing channel, an accessibility channel, so all different ways to engage in discussion there. If anybody has any issues getting into any of these spaces, you can feel free to reach out to any of the four of us pictured on this slide. Kyle Susi, Jill Hart, and Roger Susi are my board counterparts, and we're always here to answer questions and just help out in any way. If you're interested in getting involved, you can also reach out to us. Right now, the work is pretty lightweight because we are virtual, which is nice, but always also open to feedback and ideas. So we're here for you. Just reach out anytime. Our next meeting, we just firmed up the date, will be Tuesday, September 22nd, and it's going to feature Amanda Stockwell. And we're really excited to have her. She's a prolific writer, speaker, and she is going to be talking about fitting UX research into agile development, which is, a pretty hot topic lately, as a lot of groups are starting to really implement agile methodologies and trying to also be user-centric. So bringing those two things together should be pretty interesting. That'll also be virtual as well. So some events that we just want to take a minute to highlight that are coming up. Enterprise Experience 2020, this is virtual. You can see the link there. By the way, I think, Kyle, we will be posting these slides as well as a recording. So anything that we're covering here in the housekeeping slides, you should have access to after the fact. Is that right, Kyle?
Yep, you're absolutely correct. Yep.
Okay, cool, thank you. UXPA International Conference was scheduled for the beginning of September, but they have postponed it till August 2021. So stay tuned for that. Next, we have UX Strat, which is also online now. It's 2 days coming up next month. And, you're able to go and sign up through their website and in order to attend virtually. Same with the UX Writers Conference, a digital event. This one's coming up in October, so still plenty of time to sign up for this one. And then the last one that we'll highlight today is Interaction 21. So this is, as you can see, a whole week. It's the tail end of January into beginning of February, and this is also going to be a virtual event. So be on the lookout for these events and definitely take advantage of everything going virtual, because it means that we have a lot more access to things that maybe we wouldn't have had otherwise, because sometimes travel can be prohibitive. So it's a good opportunity. Taking a second to just call out job opportunities. We have Fiserv in Manchester is looking for a UX designer. DECA, also in Manchester, looking for a UI UX designer. Newsbank in Nashua is looking for a senior UI UX designer. Skillsoft in Nashua, UX designer, as well as SumTotal in Nashua as well, looking for a UX designer. In Merrimack, Fidelity is looking for a senior UX designer. And then in Portsmouth, Proximity Lab is looking for a UX project manager. So interesting opportunity for anybody who has a project management background. I'll take a second to just pause. We usually like to ask if anybody else has any, knows of any job openings that they might want to share here, or if you're looking for a position, if you'd like to take a second to introduce yourself to the group, we can pause to do that.
I'd like to, if that's possible.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. So I haven't turned on my camera. Hi, I'm Emily Avery. I'm a user researcher. And I'm currently based in the Boston area, but I'm actually moving back home to New Hampshire, up to the Seacoast area. And I've been looking for a position either in UX research or in research ops, either 100% remote or based in that particular area of New Hampshire. And I'd love to connect with anyone. Feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. It's Emily Avery. And I'd love to just connect. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Another good way to connect would be through, I would encourage people to connect through our Slack workspace too, because you have the opportunity to kind of reach people directly as well as in the group conversations. So anyone else with some job announcements? If not, I will move on. Again, you'll be able to see these posted after the fact and or in the recording. So I want to take a second, as always, to acknowledge Market Street Talent, our sponsor. We're remote right now, but when we're in person, there's always a big pile of pizza and beverages for us. So wanted to take a second to acknowledge Market Street Talent and specifically Jay, who's on the meeting here. So I'll take a second, Jay, hand it over to you to share some announcements, tell us about Market Street Talent.
Thanks. That's nice. Always a nice welcome. Everybody who doesn't know, I'm Jay. I think there's a couple that I've seen that have joined that I've never connected with. So I'm a senior technical recruiter at Market Street Talent. Normally we provide awesome food and beverage, which is 50% of the reason people come to the meeting is because of the awesome food and the good people. And then the other 50% are for the people who come and speak at these events, which is awesome. So we are a technical recruiting firm specializing in anything tech, really, from desktop support to UX to developers, designers. We do have an opportunity that's open in Portsmouth for any more senior resources. If anybody has any consumer electronic space, we have a small client in Portsmouth that's looking for a senior person, permanent position. So let me know. I did post it on our Facebook, or sorry, your UXPA NH Facebook page, so that if anybody wants, they can get in touch with me there. But I'm happy to point anybody in the right direction, as well as a couple of good opportunities that are on there for sure. So if there are anybody else that's looking there, looks like there's a couple of good positions. So we'll know if we can help as well. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Jay. All right, so we can officially begin. So I'm super excited to introduce Neha and Dheeraj. This is a presentation that they put together originally and intended to present at South by Southwest. back, I think, in March, but we all know what happened to conferences in 2020. So here we are today, and I guess the need to go virtual means that we are extra lucky because they are bringing this presentation to us. And a little bit about Neha and Dheeraj. I actually have known Neha personally and professionally for almost 13 years, which is crazy. When we first crossed paths in Philadelphia, we both were graphic designers, involved in our local design community, AIGA. Neha was, we both were kind of dabbling in some higher education, but Neha ended up going on and becoming associate professor and department chair at La Roche La Roche University in Pittsburgh, and then eventually made her way back to Philadelphia and transitioned to UX design. And I always like pointing out that years later kind of made the similar transition from graphic design to UX. And I owe it all to Neha for helping me decipher a UX job description that ultimately turned into, my first UX role. So I owe it all to you, Neha. Now everybody knows. I've had the pleasure of getting to know Dheeraj through the, planning of tonight's presentation, and I've really enjoyed all of our discussions so far. I think your passion for creating meaningful experiences that resonates comes through, and certainly just in the way that we've talked about trying to prepare the presentation for this audience. And so your care and detail definitely shines through. And I should have mentioned at the beginning that Dheeraj and Neha are co-workers at a small company in Philadelphia called Think Company, which is a UX and development consultancy in Philadelphia. So both of them have teamed up to put this presentation together. It's really interesting. I think it's equal parts UX, equal parts storytelling, and a really neat way to look at UX through the lens of this really interesting and unique group and the service design that they have informally created and are really good at. So with that, I will hand it over to you both to present, and I'll say again one more time, thank you so much. And we'll have, like I said, we'll keep questions in the chat for now, and we'll circle back at the end. So let me hand over to you all. Are you able to?
Yeah.
Let Dheeraj. Awesome.
Second. All right. Let me know if everyone is able to see my screen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Coming up.
Final test. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Title card. All right, great.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Christine, and for the rest of the board for having us. We're super excited. And like you mentioned, Christine, we're really just jazzed about telling more people about the Dabbawalas because it's not a service that most people in the States are familiar with. And hopefully you'll get as nerdy and jazzed about it as we have in doing the research for this deck. So without further ado, we might as well get started.
Yeah. And before we start, I just wanted to add to this is a topic that's also very close to my heart because I grew up in Mumbai and have sort of known about the Dabbawalas for the longest time. But I myself was surprised when we did our research for this talk and uncovered all of the intricacies behind the service. So we are very excited to share it with you today.
Yeah, so to start out, I'd like you all to imagine your typical morning during the week. If it's anything like mine, you might start with a cup of tea or coffee, and then you look at your to-do list. It's usually probably a little overwhelming, at least mine is. And, I have a series of meetings and I go about my morning. My calendar is usually pretty crazy. And then sometime around 10:30, 11, my stomach starts grumbling. It's not time for lunch yet, so I just have to power through. And then usually what happens is in the frenzy of the morning, somehow we get around to 12:30 and I'm starving and I realize, shoot, I didn't pack a lunch. And then I look at my next meeting and I'm like, I don't have time to get a lunch either. So usually that leaves me really, really hangry. I don't know if anybody else can relate to this scurry that happens every day. You know, imagine instead though, you get through your crazy busy morning, you haven't given lunch a thought, but when you arrive at your desk, you have a hot home cooked meal waiting for you. And this is the dream that Dabbawalas make a reality every day for thousands of people in Mumbai. And so Dabbawalas, they come to your house and pick up your home cooked meal for you. They deliver it to your workplace by the time you're ready to eat lunch. They also pick up your empty dabba and bring it back to your house, and it's there before you've arrived home in the evening. So just to go over the language here, dabba in Hindi means box, or in this context, it means lunchbox. Wala means person, hence a dabbawala is the person who brings you your lunchbox.
So before we dive deep into sort of the intricacies of the Dabbawalas and what they do, we wanted to give you a little background about the history and culture behind the Dabbawalas. So the story of the Dabbawalas starts in 1890, and the story goes like this. There was a banker who one day he just wanted someone to basically pick up his lunch from his house, bring it to his workplace, and just drop it off his desk at around like noon, you know, at around lunchtime. So what he did was, at that time, he went over to Churchgate Station, and right outside the station, there were usually like these daily wage laborers who one could like hire for a day's work and pay them. So basically, what this person did is he approached one of them, gave them some money, and was like, could you just pick up my lunchbox? Here's my address. Go to my house, pick it up. Here's my office. Come back and just drop it here at like 12. And so they did that. And this person started requesting the service again and again. It sort of started becoming a recurring thing. It was very convenient for the banker. Soon, a lot of people in his office also started getting really curious about it and also started subscribing to the service. Like they started paying this person to go pick up their lunchbox from home. And it was around this time that the person who was doing all these deliveries realized, hey, I could turn this into a business or a service. This person's name was Mahadev Pawaji Bachche. And what he did was he then went and gathered around 100 men and started the Dabbawala service as we know it today. Today, the entire Dabbawala strength is of around 5,000 men, and they are primarily men. This is one of the issues with the Dabbawalas that we've had, that it's primarily a male workforce, but we can get that later. It's primarily an illiterate workforce. Most do not know how to read and write. Some do, but most do not. They're primarily aged between 18 to 65. And in a day, they carry around 130,000 dabbas. Now, as Neha mentioned, they not only pick up the dabba from your house, get it to your workplace, but they also take your empty dabba after lunch and bring it back. That means they're doing around 260,000 deliveries or transactions in a day, which is quite crazy. And they're achieving all of this with an error rate of 1 in 16 million, which is kind of equivalent to a Six Sigma certified operation. And another really interesting quirk or just fact about the Dabbawalas is most of them hail from the same region around Mumbai. So they're not Mumbai natives, they're migrant workers who come to Mumbai from a region around Mumbai called the Sahyadri Hills. And over there, they're strong believers of a god named Vitthal. And one of his core tenets actually is that one of the highest forms of service one can do is serving food to the hungry. And so for them, this is kind of a quote that encapsulates their mission statement. And it says, we're getting a golden chance to walk the path of spirituality while earning our bread. Delivering food to office goers is like a service to God. And honestly, I cannot think of a stronger mission statement that can drive the service such as the Mumbai Dabbawalas. Now, note, we keep saying Mumbai Dabbawalas, and that's primarily because that's where they operate in Mumbai. a lot of people have tried taking the Dabbawala model and tried replicating it in other cities, but they've not been successful. And part of it has to do with the geography of Mumbai and the way it is structured. Mumbai is very much like New York in that it's an island city built on reclaimed land, and it's connected to the mainland through like bridges. It has a dense city urban core near the south of Mumbai, and there's sprawling suburbs all around. And people usually have to travel from the suburbs to the city to work, and primarily they rely on the Mumbai local train network. What this means is commutes are very long. The Mumbai rail network is strained and it is like running always at like max capacity. And that means trains are always super crowded. It makes it very difficult for you to, it makes it difficult to just get inside, let alone carry anything with you. The other factor that has made the Dabbawalas popular is the fact that in India, culturally still eating out is not quite culturally in. There are a lot of factors behind this. Most offices are not equipped with fully functioning cafeterias, so there are very few options at work. Even the fact that in India you have people with varying religious, cultural, dietary preferences all living together in one small area. It just makes it very difficult for someone with a very specific sort of diet to find a consistent source of healthy food. You know, you can't eat junk food every day. That's just gonna like go downhill. So again, that is another reason that a lot of people tend to prefer home cooked meals, which makes the Dabbawala service that much more viable. A brief just overview of the Mumbai local network. It consists of around 60 stations throughout the entire network. They run 2,342 trains daily. It's a lot of trains. They carry 7,500,000 travelers daily. It's a lot of people. That, in fact, is actually equivalent to sort of moving the entire population of New Zealand in one day. And that's happening every day. So that's kind of crazy. All these trains are very tightly scheduled. They usually run about a minute to a minute and a half apart to 2 minutes. And they stop at stations for a very short time. As you can see, you get only 40 seconds at a major station to like load anything onto the train. So that means that's not only enough time for you to like get off, but somebody needs to like get in as well. And sometimes at smaller stations, it's just a 20-second time window. And that is why we don't have doors. In the Mumbai local, I mean. I'm just kidding. It's
He's not kidding. I'm just laughing because this is the point in rehearsal where his comment about doors always cracked me up. He's right. There are no doors on the Mumbai local because you have to load and unload very, very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it'll take 20 seconds just for a door to open. Like it's not viable.
Okay, so let's talk about service design for a second before we get into the delivery service itself, because that's the lens from which we're going to speak with you today. So we were trying to think of a good analogy of a service that we're all probably familiar with. So we want to talk to you a little bit about air travel, and we'll use that as a bit of a comparison as we go throughout the talk today. So most of us are probably familiar with air travel, right? And there's a lot of complicated pieces and parts that go into that end-to-end experience. So for example, you might learn about a deal on a flight via some form of advertising, a billboard or a commercial, right? And then when it's time to buy the ticket, you, if you're like me, will likely go online to buy the ticket on a website. Or you might, will you flip the slide there?
Sorry.
That's okay. Or you might call the airline and buy your ticket that way. And then once you have made the reservation, when it's time to check in, you have a couple options, right? So you can check in online, download the boarding pass to your phone, or you can go to the counter and have them print it, or you can interact with the kiosk at the airport and it'll spit the boarding pass out for you. And then when it's time to make your way to the gate, you likely have to interact with some directional signage to make your way through the airport, through security, maybe find the restroom and a bite to eat. And once you board the plane, you might interact with a brochure of some sort. So that could be an advertisement, a menu, maybe the safety card. And then if it's a longer flight, you might interact with some in-flight entertainment. When you disembark the plane, as you make your way back through the airport, you might, maybe you ask someone for help, right? Follow some directional signage to baggage claim again, make your way maybe to ground transportation to catch either an Uber or a taxi or a train or something. And so you can see the end-to-end experience in air travel, right, involves a lot of different touch points here. And so whether you're an advertiser or a graphic designer, a UX designer, a web designer, maybe you're an environmental designer designing the signage, an industrial designer, an architect, probably a whole host of other professions I can't think of right now. You all have a small piece in a very big whole, and it's how all those pieces come together that determine whether you make a very smooth and desirable experience for the consumer or not. And so this is a good quote from Fast Company that further explains that. It says, design is all around you, and that's really the crux of the service design discipline. It's a practice that lives between others. It lies not simply in the design of the check-in kiosk or the boarding pass, but in the integration of all those into one total experience. So the other way to break down service design is into people, props, and processes. And obviously, we didn't go through all the people, props, and processes of the air travel experience, but you get the idea. We went through some of the major ones. And then when it comes to the, one more quote here by Sarah Gibbons. If you're interested in service design, she has a really good series on the Nielsen-Norman Group. She defines service design as the activity of planning and organizing a business's resources, meaning the people, props, and processes, in order to, number one, improve the employee experience. That sounds a little counterintuitive, but if you improve the employee experience, then indirectly you're improving the customer experience. And so in the case of the Dabbawalas, these are some of the people, props, and processes that we'll go through, but there's one more factor to service design to remember, which is that you want to integrate those people, props, and processes across what we call the front stage and the backstage. So front stage is what we just went through with air travel, right? That's everything as a traveler, as the customer or the audience that you see and interact with. But then backstage, we know there's all kinds of things happening behind the scenes. So backstage is everything that the consumer doesn't see, but that's sort of like the connective tissue that makes sure all the front stage experiences are happening smoothly. And so another quote from Sarah Gibbons, she says, when backstage problems exist, they have front stage consequences. And I think we can probably all relate to that, whether it's air travel or another service experience where we've gotten, not so great service, or we've had a frustrating experience, or there's inconsistency, or misinformation, what have you. Those are usually a result of backstage problems. And so again, just to recap, the entire delivery cycle for a Dabbawala starts and ends at your house. They go through a sorting process in detail that we'll work through in detail in just a bit.
All right. So today we're going to be following the journey of Nirali's Dabba. So Nirali Nirali works at a tech startup in Mumbai. She lives about 13 miles away from her work, and she uses Mumbai locals to travel to work. Work usually starts at 9, which means she has to leave from her house at 8 in order to get to work at 9. And that just makes it really inconvenient for her to sort of wake up early and pack a lunch and carry it with her to work. So instead, what she's done is she's subscribed to the Dabbawala service, wherein a Dabbawala comes every morning to her house and picks it up and brings the lunch over to her workplace. And her mother-in-law, since she lives at home, she has agreed to sort of cook lunch for Nirali and pack up her dabba for the Dabbawala to take to work. Now, Nirali had always known about the Dabbawala service, and that's primarily because her father was also a subscriber of that service for a really long time and had nothing but good things to say about the service. So for her, it was sort of a no-brainer when it came to choosing the Dabbawalas. There was an innate sense of trust is basically what I meant. Subhash is our Dabbawala. He is 54 years old, and like many Dabbawalas, he's a third generation Dabbawala. This is usually something that is sort of very familiar in the sense that if once somebody is a Dabbawala, usually the son would follow in the same footsteps and would become a Dabbawala as well. Once someone is a Dabbawala, they're usually a Dabbawala for life. So it's a very close-knit sort of community. They know each other. Anyway, so Subhash's grandfather and father before him was also a Dabbawala. So now our journey begins. As I mentioned, Nirali needs to get to work by 9, which means she has to leave from her house at 8 a.m. So by then she's out of the house, she's on her way to her work. And by around 9 a.m., Nirali's mother-in-law has had like enough time to sort of like wake up. She's sort of had her morning cup of chai, and she starts cooking lunch for Nirali. By around 9:30 a.m., Nirali's mother-in-law is done cooking lunch, and she's packed everything up. And like clockwork, at 9:30 a.m., Subhash arrives every day to pick up the dabba. Now, once Subhash picks up Nirali's dabba, here we sort of encounter our first backstage touch point. Again, it's a touch point that neither Nirali nor Nirali's mother-in-law sees, but this is something that is very vital for the entire process to go through smoothly. And this process is actually the coding process. So the Dabbawalas have a unique coding system that they have developed. And if this was a first-time delivery, this would be the time when our Dabbawala will sort of sit down and make sure the dabba is coded properly in order to ensure it reaches its destination properly. In case of a regular customer, he just ensure that the code is there and it's accurate, and that's it.
Yeah, so to give you a little insight on the coding process, you'll see why it's so important and crucial to starting the entire delivery cycle. So if we start on the left side there where you see the magenta B, we'll get to the team in a little bit. That's Nirali's residential street code, meaning the street that she lives on. And if we move clockwise, the W is her residential station code, meaning the train station that's closest to her house. And then if we move down to the number 9, you should remember that for later in the cycle, by the way. That's her destination code, as well as N2, which is the building and the floor code of the office that she works in. And then in the middle, that's the destination code. In this case, it's Churchgate. CCG stands for Churchgate, and that's the station closest to her office.
Yeah, and while we don't really expect you to like remember what the coding system or this symbol looks like, just take a look at it and try to like absorb just the basic structure of it, because it's quite unique considering we told you that a majority of the workforce is illiterate. It's quite interesting how this coding system has been developed such that you know they're still able to use it.
Yeah, and to go back to our air travel analogy, think of the coding system on the Dabbawala lid, the Dabba's lid, as the barcode or the baggage ticket that you get at the airport if you're checking your bag. So obviously we know without that whole check-in process like won't be in motion, and who knows where your bag will go.
All right, so back to our journey. It's 9:45 a.m. Subhash has ensured that Nirali's dabba has the appropriate codes on the lid. So he loaded his dabba on his bicycle, which is primarily the primary mode of transport that the Mumbai Dabbawalas prefer.
Yeah, bikes are really important to the Dabbawalas for a couple of reasons. So number one, the traffic patterns in Mumbai, if you compare them to American traffic patterns, they can be quite chaotic and crazy. So it's not just a lot of heavy like vehicle traffic, but it's also a lot of heavy foot traffic. So the bike allows Dabbawalas to sort of like be agile and weave in and out of that traffic. They seem to skirt some traffic rules sometimes, but Mumbai, you know, people don't seem to mind because the Dabbawalas are really highly revered. And then also bikes are really low in maintenance cost and effort. Because if you think about like a scooter or a motorcycle, perhaps that's going to be a lot more cost and effort to upkeep.
So by 10 a.m., Subhash has Nirali's dabba loaded onto his bicycle. He'll usually make his usual normal delivery route in the morning. His pickup route. It's usually a fixed route unless new customers are added in, but it stays fairly standard. He'll make his entire round. He'll pick up all of his dabbas. Or on an average, a Dabbawala bicycle fully loaded will have around 30 to 35 dabbas. So in this case, let's assume that Subhash has a full load of 35 dabbas. He's done with his pickup route, which means he's now ready to head towards the nearest railway station to him, which in this case is Vilepale station, and sort of start the next backstage process that we have, which relates to sorting that we'll get into in a little bit. So before we get to sorting, we wanted to tell you a little bit about how the Dabbawalas are organized. All of the Dabbawalas are organized into teams. Teams consist of around 15 to 20 individuals. Each team is color coded. Again, color is a useful differentiator, and therefore they use it across the entire city. So for instance, Vilepale station might have 3 teams operating out of that: team blue, team orange, and team maroon. Now, normally, each team on any given day, each team will also have a set of 5 people on reserve every day, and that is to account for anything that could go wrong. That it's sort of a contingency measure. All of these extra Dabbawalas will have with them extra pallets, extra bicycles, and extra cell phones, just to account for any delays in the entire pipeline. Like for instance, if a Dabbawala's bicycle gets a flat, or if there was a delay in adding a new customer into the system, or if there's an extra load of dabbas on one day, all of these reserves are ready to sort of pitch in and make sure that the entire process runs smoothly. Now, most of these teams they're engaged in friendly competition with each other. Each team is trying to grow their customer base. Each team is trying to expand their business. But when it comes to the time between 10:30 to 2:30 p.m., which is sort of the delivery window for the Dabbawalas, all of them come together to form one team with one mission. And that mission is ensuring the right dabba gets delivered to the right person on time every day. Now, here's the really interesting way the Dabbawalas operate. They basically cover the entire city of Mumbai. That means you can get a dabba picked up from anywhere in the city and have it delivered anywhere in the city. And the way they're able to do that is they have a sorting operation at every station. And then at every station, there are 60 Dabbawalas that are assigned to 60, one pallet each. So that brings up a total of 60 pallets, all destined to go to one of each of the 60 stations on the network. So this is happening at every station. At every station, there is a Dabbawala headed to every other station within the network. And this way, they're able to cover the entirety of Mumbai. All right, so back to our journey. Our Dabbawala Subhash has arrived at the station. In this case, it's Vilepale station, and the sorting process starts. Now, if you remember, we had shown you in the code, right at the center, where the letter CCG. So that actually indicates the destination station. And that is actually the code that is also displayed on the local train and on the signage. I forget what are they called? The boards where you see the upcoming trains and stuff. Anyway, the significance of that is Subhash will just look at the dabba, will see it says CCG on it, and will just place it into the pallet with the appropriate symbol on it. So he might not even be able to read what CCG is, but he can look at the symbol, put it in the right pallet. He can look at the train, see it's the same symbol, and that means, yeah, it's probably going to that station. Anyway, as you can see, Subhash is assigned a pallet going to Dadar, but that's not the intended destination for Nirali's dabba. So he'll pick up Nirali's dabba, put it in the appropriate pallet. Similarly, other Dabbawalas will take their dabbas, and if they're headed towards Dadar, they'll put it in Subhash's pallet in order to continue the journey. Now, here's another interesting thing we wanted to highlight. Subhash has now transferred ownership of his customer's dabba to a second Dabbawala. Now, Nirali doesn't know this Dabbawala, nor does this Dabbawala know Nirali. However, there's this innate sense of trust between the team where Subhash knows that he has this trust in the service in itself, that he knows, yes, this dabba is going to reach its destination at the right time, and he's completely confident about that.
So here's some photos of what the sorting process looks like at one of the train stations. You can see there's a lot of dabbas on one pallet, and they're clearly very heavy. And as we said, there's a lot of trains that go through Mumbai every day. They move very quickly. So they have very little time, about 20 to 40 seconds to load and unload these dabbas. And one thing you can see that helps with that is that all the dabbas are primarily, for the most part, the same size and shape. That standardization really helps in the efficiency in terms of stacking and loading and unloading the dabbas. And so to bring back the air travel example, you can think of this again as if we've ever checked a bag, you watch your bag go through that little conveyor belt and little hole in the wall, and you have no idea what's happening after that. So this is like the sorting process in the baggage claim area, or sorry, the baggage check-in area. The other thing is the sorting, right, is supposed to result in your bag getting on the same plane as you. I wish I could say I have as much faith in this baggage check-in process as I do the Dabbawalas, but maybe we'll get there someday. They're working on it.
It's all about the trust here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sweet. All right. So let's get back to our journey. It's 10:40. Our Dabbawala is ready. His pallet has been sorted. He has all of the dabbas headed towards Churchgate. So he will now board a train that's headed towards Churchgate and begin his journey. It usually takes him about an hour. So by around 11:50 a.m., our Dabbawala arrives at Churchgate station. He'll unload his pallet and he'll sort of take it to the next staging area that the Dabbawalas have set up. And now over here, our Dabbawala will see that there's literally an army of bicycles, around 60 bicycles at that station, each with a number from 1 to 61 on them. Along with that, here too, the Dabbawala sort of account for any unforeseen circumstances, and so they have a contingency measure in place. They will have extra bicycles on hand here as well as people to operate them, again, to account for any delays being caused in the service and an expected increase in volume. They're just ready. They do not want any excuse to slow down their system. Anyway, so the interesting thing is, since the bicycles are numbered from 1 to 9, it directly sort of coincides with the destination station code on the dabba. So in that, if you remember, the first number in the destination code was 9. And what that instructs the Dabbawala is that this dabba needs to go on bicycle number 9. So what all the Dabbawalas will basically do is look at their lunch boxes, and based on the number that's on the destination station code, they will go and hang it on the appropriate bike. So our third Dabbawala, who is actually operating bike number 9, will now get Nirali's dabba, as well as other dabbas that may have come from different stations that are intended for bike number 9. Now again, our dabba has transferred from our second Dabbawala to a third Dabbawala. Again, unknown. Subhash doesn't know him, Nirali doesn't know him. But there's again this sense of trust that yes, this dabba will make it to my customer no matter what.
So here's some photos of on the other side, right before Nirali gets her dabba, what that looks like. So Dabbawalas will use either a big hand cart like you see on the left, or a bike again to deliver it to the office. And it depends on how many dabbas they need to deliver at that particular stop and kind of what the area is. If they need to deliver a lot of dabbas in an area that's not too congested, they might use a hand cart because obviously they're slower, but they hold a lot more dabbas. But if they don't need to deliver as much and it's a congested area, they'll probably stick to a bike so that they have that agility.
So we're in the final leg of our journey. It's 12 p.m. It's getting close to lunch, which is usually around 1 o'clock. Our Dabbawala has his usual delivery route based on most of his deliveries will be in sort of one area. So our Dabbawala might be making a maximum trip to like 2 or 3 buildings and dropping off his entire load of dabbas. So slowly he'll make his way towards Nirali's building. Finally, he will look at the last part of the destination code that had the number N2 on it. The N signified the building. they just know what those letters mean in each area. Most Dabbawalas will operate in one area for a really long time. So they know all those streets like the back of their hands. Anyway, the last number there is the floor code. So a Dabbawala will go and drop the Dabba on floor number 2 and will leave. And what that means is come 1 o'clock, all Nirali has to do is just go and pick up her Dabba, and she has a hot, still hot, home cooked fresh meal waiting for her.
Yeah, and so we just want to reiterate that happens every single day at an error rate of 1 in 16 million, which is really crazy. And not to slam the airline industry, but we did look up what the error rate is in Asia, and that's 2 out of 1,000, which is also pretty impressive, but nothing when you hold it up to 1 out of 16 million.
Also considering it's being done without tech, so that's pretty cool. So okay, once lunchtime is over, or rather during that 1 hour lunchtime when Nirali will be like having lunch, our Dabbawalas will actually use that time to take a little break themselves. Maybe they might go have lunch themselves, or they'll just sit down, relax, catch up with each other. Because by 2 p.m., Nirali will have packed up her Dabba and will leave it back where she had found it. And our Dabbawala will basically go through the entire delivery process back in reverse. That means they will go back to Nirali's office, pick up her empty Dabba, do so for the rest of the Dabbas that they delivered that day, and make sure that those Dabbas are dropped off back at Nirali's house. And what that means is by the time Nirali's back home, her lunchbox has been washed and it's ready for another day.
Yeah, so now that we went through the details of the delivery itself, we wanted to give you some insight into the operations, because that also helps make them so successful. So the first thing is they have a really, really strict adherence to standards that they've spent a lot of time developing. So honesty, timeliness, and cleanliness are of the utmost importance for Dabbawalas. And they even have some measures to enforce a lot of these standards. So for example, if a Dabbawala is not wearing his cap on duty, or if he's not carrying his valid ID while he's on duty, if he is caught drinking, or has repeated client complaints, he can be fined for all of that. So it's a very disciplined and well-oiled machine. They're very, very concerned with making sure that they have a very, very low error rate. And then the way they're organized structurally is also pretty interesting. So you can see that they have a fairly flat structure. Their leadership is fairly small. And then they have 800 group leaders that then lead the 5,000 Dabbawalas. And this is really helpful because in the next slide, you'll see that the flat structure is what allows them to share the organizational power, right? That and the fact that everybody pays into the Dabbawala trust, so they're all shareholders. Everyone actually delivers a Dabba, so whether you're the president or in the 5,000, it just depends on whether you're doing mostly delivery or just a little bit delivery, but everybody knows the delivery cycle. And leadership is also rotational. So at one point you can be part of the 5,000, but at another point you could be a director, let's say. And all the specific groups self-govern. And they also individually then will, let's say Subhash every Sunday will go visit his customers. He will upkeep the relationship, talk about how things are going, collect the fees, but also collect any feedback or any complaints the customer might have. And then since these groups self-govern, they'll all meet regularly to pool all of the income, distribute their wages after they've deducted expenses, and then they'll also address any of the disputes or that feedback collectively so they can figure out how to make that better next time. And so we want to make sure that we highlighted some takeaways. No matter where you find yourself in the design process, whether you're a service designer concerned with the entire end-to-end process, or whether you're a designer that's in charge of a couple of the touch points, there are some bullet points we can take away from the Dabbawalas that might help you. So the first thing is sticking to your core offering, right? That's really important. The Dabbawalas know Mumbai. They know the cultural preferences of Mumbaikars, and they really have their delivery system honed. And so they stick to that. And that's why over a century, they've had hardly any errors. And in order to do that, they've had to focus on their fundamentals, right? So their business plan, their supply chain, obviously the intense logistics that goes behind everything. And they also invest in training because they have all this generational knowledge that gets passed down. So that's really important for designers to be aware of as well. And then obviously we should be just like them, taking the time to establish and uphold standards, because it's that standardization that helps you control the quality always. And then because they're such a deep-rooted community, because they work together so well, they've been able to cultivate expertise and camaraderie. And of course, they're also backed by that mission. So everybody's sort of pointed in the same direction for the same reason at all times, which is super, super important. And then they've also thought about some uncontrollable factors, right? So they have the backup bikes, the backup delivery people, the backup pallets. So they've sort of tried to think of everything as much as possible. And then because of the way they're organized and the way they operate, they share a lot of organizational power. So again, if we bring that back to whatever your role is as a designer in whatever type of organization, it really helps because it means everybody's working for the same reason. So ultimately what they're doing is they're thinking holistically across their people, props, and processes, both front stage and backstage. And they're really, really committed to connecting these pieces and parts seamlessly and in harmony. So if you're a designer that's in charge of one or a couple of touch points, it's important that you can find out as much as you can about the touch point that might come before or after yours, and understand sort of what are those processes and backstage things that link those touch points together, because that's going to help you design your touch point that much more effectively. So another quote from Sarah Gibbons here. She says that an organization's backstage processes, meaning how you do things internally, have as much, if not more, impact on the overall user experience as the visible points of interaction that the user encounters. So you might also be wondering, looking ahead, what is the fate of the Dabbawalas, right? So we're going to go into a little bit of that. They've started to really expand some of their offerings, so you can tell that they're pretty ingenuous business people. So right now you can, I wish I had known this when I was in India in December. Unfortunately, I did not. But you can sign up to spend a day with a Dabbawala and kind of follow one around and see their genius at work. They've also done for years now lots of talks and seminars at some pretty reputable institutions like Harvard and Oxford. Business and management institutions are really, really excited to understand how they do what they do. They're also expanding into wearable advertisement, so you could pay the Dabbawalas to have your logo on their uniform, let's say, so that's another good revenue generator for them. And then I think somebody asked a question in the chat about, what happens if you can't get a home cooked meal from your house, let's say. The other thing that they're doing is they're partnering. Oh, go back for a second, Dheeraj.
Second. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. They're partnering with kitchens. So the nice part is if there's somebody, so typically in a traditional Indian household, if the woman is not working and she wants a way to help with the financial health of the house, she can work for one of these partnering kitchens, and the Dabbawala will, pick up food from there and deliver it to your office. The other awesome thing that they're doing a lot of good in the Mumbai community. So let's say you're wanting to donate food one day to people in need, and unfortunately in Mumbai and in India, there's a lot of people in need of food. You can tag your dabba with a sticker that says it's available for food sharing. So that morning they'll pick it up and deliver it to a community in need. You'll still get your dabba back in the evening. So it's pretty awesome the way they're expanding their offerings. You might also be wondering, can it survive totally tech-free? How's that gonna work, right? So we did some research before the talk, and we learned that they're keeping their delivery cycle, meaning everything that Dheeraj walked you through, tech-free, but they are starting to look into some other digital touch points. A lot of them have to do with before the sign-up process happens. So you can go to mumbai.dabbawala.in right now. They have a website. It's still under construction, you can tell, but they're clearly trying to grow their web presence in that way. And then they're also looking into like a digital doorstep registration and agreement process. So somebody might come to your door with an iPad and get you all set up. But as far as we know, the actual core of their delivery is still going to be tech-free. So of course, with that, you might be thinking, what about the tech startup food delivery companies, right? Like, are they nipping at their heels? The answer is no, not so far. And there's a variety of reasons for that. The first one is, as you've seen, the Dabbawalas are really, really high performing service. They're also really low cost. So it costs about $20-ish a month for this service, depending on how much you sign up for, which is about 15-ish hundred rupees, or yeah, rupees a month. The other thing is, if you all, you're probably familiar with the fact in the startup community, it's really hard to keep people. So there's a lot of turnover. And so it's really hard to keep, domain knowledge that way. But they're a tight-knit community, and there's a lot of generational knowledge that they're able to retain. So that really gives them an edge. And one of the things that the generational knowledge gives them a leg up on is their intricate knowledge of the Mumbai roads and transit systems, all the little back alleyways that might not be in Google Maps. In fact, I read an article from high up at one of these other delivery companies, and he said, basically, we thought Google Maps could replicate the knowledge that the Dabbawalas have of Mumbai, but it just couldn't compare. They have up-to-date information. They know it like the back of their hands. And I think the last three pieces are really their key differentiators. They deliver home-cooked food, right? Whereas all these other companies, they're delivering food from a restaurant. So the Dabbawalas have kind of a hold on that cultural preference for home-cooked food. Because of their low error rate, they have this unwavering customer trust. And because they come from the same community, because they pass down this profession from generation to generation, and because they all see their job as a mission to serve God, they have this intense employee dedication. And I think those three things are really, really hard for new businesses to replicate.
Absolutely.
So one last quote here from them. They said, new companies give their customers good offers, but they're just interested in capturing the market. The Dabbawalas have deeper reasons for doing it. Serving their customers is like serving their God.
So since the whole COVID-19 pandemic hit India, the Dabbawalas obviously have had to suspend services. This is primarily because the city of Mumbai went into lockdown. That means the local trains had stopped working, and that's pretty much what the Dabbawalas rely on. But also primarily because a lot of people were not going to work anymore. People were working either remotely or just not traveling to work anymore. And that just meant there was no demand for their service. So ever since the lockdown hit, a lot of basically daily wage laborers and migrant workers were the ones who were hurt the most. And the Dabbawalas are primarily a migrant workforce. As I mentioned, they are not natively from Mumbai. They're like from an area around Mumbai. And most of them sort of burned through their savings to try and get back home before everything got locked down. And even after that, their main income source was cut off. So they did not have any means of making money. The government has been very slow in sort of like responding to the plight of the migrant workers as well. So that's been pretty difficult for them. As it is, the amount of money that they charge for their service has not scaled as much as it should have. Like, it hasn't kept pace with inflation, I guess, to the point where they're probably not making a lot of profit out of that. Which is why they've had to rely on services like a day with the Dabbawala, or all of the speeches and sort of lectures, seminars that they do at these institutes. Anyway, the point is the Dabbawalas are aware that it's going to take a while for everything to go back to normal. Mumbai city has started to open up a little bit. It's going through various phases as certain sectors open up slowly and people slowly start returning back to work. However, the Dabbawalas are aware that it's going to take a long time. People are going to be working from home for a while, and it's going to be a while till they return back to sort of the volume of deliveries that they were handling pre-pandemic. And so for that reason, the Dabbawalas have been looking at alternative sort of avenues to employ their logistical prowess. So they've been looking at either delivering couriers, mails, e-commerce, deliveries, etc. This is a quote we got from Subhash Tarikar, who is the president of the Mumbai Dabbawala Association. He says, "There is no doubt our business will continue to see a slump for a few more months, even after lockdown is lifted, because work from home will continue for a lot of our customers. If the Dabbawalas are not needed, we can do other kinds of deliveries like courier and mail deliveries or e-commerce."
Yeah, so with that, because we've gotten so much from the Dabbawalas, we've really learned a lot from them. We did want to make just one plug for them. They are taking donations on their website. Again, that's mumbaidabbawala.in. There's a donate now button in the top right that brings up a pop-up that you'll see here. Right now, a bank transfer is the only way it seems that you can donate to them. So if, we know it's hard times for everybody, totally understandable, but we wanted to put out there in case somebody else felt like they wanted to donate. They're literally starving now, even though they've spent over 100 years feeding the city of Mumbai. So if you do decide to donate, we would recommend a service called TransferWise. It's very secure and safe. It's very reliable. It's also extremely inexpensive. I did it myself before this talk. So again, if you can find it in your hearts to do that, try TransferWise.
Before we end, we wanted to give a very special thanks to two people. Firstly, we wanted to thank Mr. Raghunath Megde. He's the former president of the Nutan Mumbai Tiffin Box Suppliers Trust, and had the absolute pleasure to sit down with him and have a chat over a cup of chai last December when I had visited India. He sat down with me, sort of gave me the whole sort of background information of the Dabbawala service and sort of how it works. And a lot of what we spoke about today and what we presented to you is a result of all of the information shared by Mr. Megde. So thank you, Mr. Megde. Along with that, I also want to thank my friend Nirali Shah. She lives in Mumbai. She is an actual subscriber to the Dabbawala service. So she was able to sit down with me and sort of give me her side of the experience as well. Sort of her experience with the whole Dabbawala service. And a lot of, again, what we told you was direct first-hand information that Nirali had given us. So thank you, Nirali. And with that, we're open to questions. I saw there were a bunch of questions in the chat. I just didn't have time to go through them.
Yeah, Kyle, Christine, do you have suggestions? Should we just go through them as we see fit, or would you like to facilitate in some way? I mean, I'm happy to do it, however.
Oh, yeah, we can just go down the list as well.
I think some of the questions have been answered along the way. I know my question was.
Same.
So this was fascinating, actually.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. I know the one question I put in there at the top, we were wondering about the error rate. And
well, that's a question I put in. I think that's been answered. I was like, well, all the tiffin boxes kind of look the same. The meals, I mean,
yeah.
Could it be easily mistaken? That's like, oh, well, this is maybe somebody else's lunch, but you don't know that maybe that was supposed to be your lunch.
Yeah.
But because it's coded, then no, so that came later and answered my question. But you had a question about the coding.
Yeah.
It looked like the coding on one of the photos was written on the top of the tiffin box, whereas when you showed the code, it gave us the impression that it was like a printed decal or label that was adhered to the Dabba.
No.
And how is that like labeled?
Yeah, that's actually just done by hand. They use like markers or paint or like pens. And I mean, the important part is it's more the reason that they used colors and simple symbols was because they know that their workforce is primarily illiterate. So it doesn't make sense to print the whole name of Churchgate on that. They're not going to be able to read it. But if you can just draw the same symbol sort of that appears on the right train that you are supposed to take, then it becomes sort of like a fail-safe. All you have to do is just look at the train that has sort of the same symbol on it and just get on that train. It's gonna the right destination.
Yeah.
And I'm sure colors and the iconography are just faster to acquire that information versus reading.
Exactly.
even if you're not illiterate, right? So you can just, especially with the speeding, the sorting speed that's required. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, and somebody had asked a question about, does the code get washed off every now and then? I don't actually know, but I would assume, yeah, it probably gets, weathered and rubbed off at some point. So I would assume that they're like going back and rewriting it on that, however they need to.
Yeah.
Does the Dabbawala who picks up the food, do they, verify that the code on the top of the box is correct at that point, and maybe like clean it up, rewrite it, so that they know before it starts its journey that it's got everything it needs?
Yes.
Yeah, and the one thing we wanted to use so many examples to parallel to UX specifically, but we were just running out of time. And the one thing I think that's really fascinating is how many of us as UX designers deal with dirty data all the time, right? Like we design products and experiences that essentially hinge upon clean, rich data being passed from one database to another, right? And those databases talking to each other properly, right? And no little metadata getting left here and left there, right? And even as a customer, you've experienced it, right? Like, I feel like my sister went to Ohio State University. I'm almost 40, she's almost 38. And like literally still different family members get calls because they just will not update all their databases like cleanly and efficiently with the same information. And like it's different emails, different addresses, different phone numbers. So this coding system to me is like the best analogy for most of the reasons I think as a UX designer, I have a headache most times is because you're like, here's the experience, we've designed this flow, it'll work perfectly. And then your genius developers are like, I don't know, because at this point in the flow, we only have this data. And at that point in the flow, that data goes somewhere else, we don't know where. And instead we have this new data. Or we have this data, but we don't know how to surface it, right? Like we've all been in that craziness. And I honestly think that's probably what happens with air travel and that baggage claim ticket. It's like the ticket is there and it has the information it needs. But do all the other databases have the corresponding information? Because what happens, right? So I think that's so fascinating with the Dabbawalas.
This is really a great example of user-centered design. And being that the Dabbawalas are the users, they have designed the information construct that is used, and it's ideally suited perfectly for their needs, and has probably been refined over time for that. So it wasn't like somebody, mandated, this is the coding structure that you're going to follow. It was something that I'm assuming that was derived out of necessity and their innate knowledge of the city, the structure and how the delivery system needed to operate, and also based on the accessibility constraints of illiteracy.
Yes.
I think it's really interesting that that stood out to me is how, so in my context, I work essentially doing service design inside a giant enterprise, and we over-engineer within an inch of our lives everything. And that was kind of my takeaway as I was like, observing what feels like an elaborate process. It's actually really boiled down to its, the most simple parts, and they have not made it complicated. And I bet that has a huge plays a huge factor in why their error rates are low, because their process is very simple.
Yeah, I also think a lot of it has to do with their knowledge of the process that happens before and after their particular role, right? So how many times in UX do we, design the perfect interface, let's say, and it's informed by all this user research and your business stakeholders love it, and it's going to have the ROI and the NPS and the blah, blah, blah that the business wants, right? Like all those things check off. And then it's those handoff points, right? So does the content strategist hand off the stuff properly to the designer? Do the designers hand off the stuff properly to the developers, right? Does the legal team get involved at the right spot? And it's like, that's the system, right? That makes digital products happen. it's not really that different than the Dabbawalas, except for scale, of course. But they really understand kind of what is that governance and workflow around the little touch point that I'm in charge of. And that is super, super key for UX. I think Dheeraj and I work for a consultancy. So we design that system that our clients are going to employ almost more than we design the actual thing that they asked us to design. Because otherwise what happens is we design the thing and then we go away and then it just like breaks down, right? Like it has momentum for like a month or two and then it just breaks down because they didn't look at sort of like the governance and the workflow of all of that. Sorry, Dheeraj, you were going to say something.
I forgot what I was going to add, so it doesn't matter, I guess.
Oh, sorry. There was another question here. Are meals typically provided by a mom, mom-in-law, sister, or wife? Do some people also purchase their meal from someone who prepares it?
Yeah, I can take this one, Nia.
Sure.
So we kind of got touched that a little bit in talk, but especially now, there's been sort of an increase in the number of young sort of students / working professionals who are migrating to Mumbai from all across India. They usually like travel alone. They're either living either alone or with like roommates and stuff like that. And again, they may not have somebody to like cook for them. And I'm just going to say like most Indian sort of like, I would say teenage to 20s people are very spoiled. We've always had like somebody
I'm
that
gonna let you
food.
Indians say that. I can't say that.
Like we hardly know how to cook until it's like time to fend for ourselves, and that usually comes much later in life. So this is like a big shocker to a lot of people who like move to a city. They have like no means of cooking or like surviving for themselves, and you just cannot survive on outside food. So a lot of these kitchens have become very popular, as we had mentioned, where a lot of women can housewives essentially who initially would not have had a sort of separate source of income to add to the family, but now they can just set up a kitchen at home. They can just decide to like cook a certain amount of food extra every day, and they connect with these Dabbawalas, and these Dabbawalas in turn will connect them with the customer. So for instance, if a new student or someone has moved to Mumbai, they can just call up these Dabbawalas and say, I want to set up a service where I get a dabba delivered to me maybe twice a day or once a day. And I want you to set up the food option as well. So they will then connect this person with like the kitchens that they have partnered with and sort of give them those options. So they can then pay not only for the service, but also the food that's being provided from the kitchen. So it's really great. It's provided a lot of opportunities there in terms of entrepreneurship, and also it's sort of adding to their service as well. So you see another question. Since Dabbawala seem to be cross-generation, how is the economic upward mobility realized for second or third generation Dabbawalas? I asked, since you mentioned that the Dabbawalas are mostly illiterate, is the service improving the lives of the service provider? Yes. Nia, do you want me to take that, or do you?
I mean, I can start. I think that like the answer is probably we don't entirely know, but this is where there's layers of just culture and history that come in, and certainly Dheeraj, you can speak to this probably better than I can. There is an unfortunate reality of India's caste system that is no longer formally intact, but certainly it's a system that has stayed socially intact in certain ways. And so this is a reality of the particular place in Mumbai or outside of Mumbai that they come from, the particular caste that they're from. I mean, if you ask me, should they be paid a lot more for their services? Of course. I'm not sure that what do we call that? I don't know, how would you even say that, Dheeraj? I'm not sure that everybody would be willing, unfortunately, to pay these particular people the amount that they deserve. So I don't know if you want to extrapolate on that.
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing. Primarily, that the Dabbawalas have two, I would say, organizational pillars. There is a Dabbawala trust that is set up, which is sort of a collective fund that everybody buys into. It's basically set up to take care of Dabbawalas as they grow older and they may not be able to carry as much, for delivery as before. But again, there's that whole cultural aspect of where they're from and their mission being very spiritually driven. Retirement, it just sounds ridiculous to a lot of them because it's more than just a job. It's a very spiritual experience for them. So even you'll find Dabbawalas again like very old and very young. They just continue to do. They just continue to be Dabbawalas. They may not they may not participate as much in like the heavy lifting of the delivery, but they might participate in maybe some governance or bookkeeping or something like that. Apart from that, that information is very sort of scarce. We don't really know what happens if you do sort of leave the Dabbawala organization. But it sounds like the Dabbawala Trust is set up to take care of them in that situation. All right, the next one is how many combinations of codes of places and stations are there? I don't know. So I know for a fact that the destination station code, there's 60 of them because there's only 60 stations that they are servicing. Apart from that, the area codes and sort of like the building code and floor code, they are very they're very area specific. So for instance, N2 might not make any sense to like someone not at Dabbawala. What does that mean? The building might not even have a name starting with N. It might be named something else, but the N2 is very arbitrary. It's just that the Dabbawalas have sort of, I would say it's more like rote learning. They just know that yes, N means this building because that they have worked in that area for years. In fact, there was a very funny incident that I had when I was going to meet Mr. Megde. We had decided to meet at near Virepali station. And I also wasn't sure if he was really Mr. Megde because the way I got in touch with him was like very sketch, I would say. It was like it was very quick. I wasn't expecting. I literally asked my friend if I can have the in this case it was actually Nirali, if I can just have the Dabbawala's number. And she was like, sure. And she gave me the number and I called them up and I was like, hey, I'm doing just a little presentation that I want to put together about the Mumbai Dabbawalas. Would you be willing to like sit down and have a chat with me? I'd be like, sure. I'm like, cool. But let's meet here at this place. And I was like, great. I went on over there and then I realized that the person I'm actually meeting is like the former president of the trust. And I'm like, wow, okay, that's insane. That's like a sort of like blind jackpot. Anyway, I reached the place. There was like a lot of traffic. It was like some coffee shop near Virepali. I'm sitting there and Mr. Megde arrives and I'm just like conversing with him like, how was your trip here and stuff like that. I mean, just like, where did you come from? How was your journey getting here? So he told me he came from, it's irrelevant, the name of the place. I passed by that place as well. And there was a ton of traffic over there. So I was like, oh, cool. That must have taken you a while. He was like, no, I just left 5 minutes ago. I was like, what? He was like, yeah, I know a shortcut. Like he just knew some other route in the middle that just avoided all of the traffic that Google Maps told me was like the fastest route to get there. So it was very interesting.
Yeah, meanwhile, so Dheeraj and I happened to be visiting India at the same time. And so we were using WhatsApp to communicate with each other. He was the one, I was doing a lot of traveling. He wasn't doing as much traveling because he was visiting his family. And so he was the one doing all this primary research. And like, I knew he was going to meet a Dabbawala, but when he came back and he messaged me and he was like, I met with a former president. I was like, what? They were like, he was like, yeah, he just showed up. So they really do share that organizational power because
Yeah,
he
because
delivers Dabbas. So he was like, sure, I'll go talk to this guy.
yeah, that was just an amazing example of their flat sort of structure. This person was actually Nirali's Dabbawala. Like he's the one who comes every morning and picks up her lunchbox from her house, and he's like a former president of the trust. So that was pretty cool.
That is neat. I'm looking at the time here. I'm wondering if we maybe have time for one more question, or if anyone has a comment, we can start to wrap up. I see one about customer loyalty, and I think that's kind of an interesting question.
Right.
I don't know if there's any thoughts on that, or even if that, is that given, and what's maybe the tie for us?
Yeah, in our research, I don't think we've found out specifically how they measure customer loyalty. But in terms of like, I think it would be pretty safe to assume that because Subhash, for example, to take our Dabbawala example, right? Because he's visiting his customers on a regular basis to collect the fees and talk with them, that's how he's collecting the feedback, because that's part of their process then when they meet up to pool the income, deduct expenses, and talk about any of the feedback. So I can't speak specifically to like how they're measuring that. I know Dheeraj, you were telling me, Mr. Megde was telling you about like hundreds of giant ledger books that they fill out and they carry to these collective meetings. And so I'm assuming that's not only keeping the books, but they might be making notations about each customer there too. But we didn't really have specific insight into that.
Yeah, one thing I can add to that is that yes, they try to maintain a very sort of like intimate personal relation with their customer. Like they will, when they're coming to like collect the fees, not only will they, it's not like they're just going to take the money and they're going to leave. They'll actually stay, linger, and like have a conversation, really develop that relationship, and that partly also helps build that sense of trust where they're like, yeah, this I trust this person for years, so there's no reason for me to like like change my service or go to another Dabbawala. Another thing is like once a Dabbawala has a customer, it's usually a customer for life, and other Dabbawalas will not go and try to like poach that customer away from the Dabbawala. If they have sort of, the only time that Dabbawala will actually change for that person would be if they're having like repeated complaints, and even though sort of the group leaders have stepped in and tried to like rectify it, if it's still not working, then they usually swap out that Dabbawala for a new Dabbawala. That's how they try to keep sort of customer satisfaction. I don't think that they're like accurately tracking any metrics. They're more relying on sort of like the human aspect of it, just like talking to their customers and sort of trying to understand their needs.
Yeah, that feels like a really nice note to kind of end on, I think, as UXers, designers, researchers, as we kind of think about all the things that we learned today. I think there's a tendency for us to all rely on the tools and modern tools and resources and data and all the things we were kind of talking about. But really, I think at the end of the day, we all have to stay grounded in kind of that higher mission of really just connecting with a customer and end user, making a meaningful interaction for them and a meaningful experience, and just do our best to keep it simple.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for giving us this presentation, sharing this really cool story with us, and I know for me it's given me a lot of things to reflect on that I don't usually think about when I think about my UX work. So thank you again, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you so much for having us. This was amazing. Yeah, a lot of fun.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
It was great.
All right. Bye. Have a good night, everyone.
Have a great night. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.